Initialisms and acronyms are often confused with each other. I think acronyms often get more attention, but actually when I was making this list, I found a lot more initialisms. So what is an initialism?
An abbreviation that's formed from the initial letters, the first letters of a sequence of words. So
on this list we have a bunch of initialisms that are place names. So the Australian Capital Territory, ACT, New South Wales, or NSW,
South Australia, SA,
Western Australia, WA, the Northern Territory, NT.
There's also the Melbourne Cricket Ground, which we usually call the MCG.
The CBD is the Central Business District.
And that one is actually not specific to Melbourne.
Lots of different cities have a central business district.
Then we have some that are related to business, business or administration.
DOB, date of birth. COB, close of business. GST, goods and services tax.
And ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics.
Then we have some initialisms relating to technology.
SMS, which stands for
Short Message Service.
IT or ICT, I think it's usually called ICT these days, Information and Communication Technology.
CGI, Computer Generated Imagery.
I don't know if that's old-fashioned, but using the computer to put in special effects.
PDF is a file type, that stands for Portable Document Format.
ATM is Automatic Teller Machine, which is why it's a tautology to say ATM machine. It's already got the word machine right in there in its name, ATM. And if you were typing on the internet, you might type BRB, meaning be right back. AKA is also known as ETA, Estimated Time of Arrival, and AFL, Australian Football League. And those are all initialisms rather than acronyms because we don't turn them into words. We pronounce the names of the letters A, C, T. It's not ACT, it's ACT. Whereas an acronym is a word that is formed from the initial letters, the first letters of other words, and it becomes a word. It's got one vowel per syllable, it's got the right kinds of consonants in the right places to sound like a word, basically. And acronyms, when they first come into the language, they tend to start out being spelled with all capital letters. But over time, as that acronym becomes more accepted and we think of it as a word more and more, people no longer think of the component parts that make up that acronym, and increasingly those words are spelt with lowercase letters. And some examples of that are
scuba, laser, radar, and also sometimes Qantas and Anzac.
Okay, so here are some actual acronyms. Words that are made up from the first letters of a sequence of words. So firstly, radar, which came into English in 1941. It means an electronic system for locating objects by means of radio waves, and it stands for radio detecting and ranging. Radar. Radar.
Then we have sonar, which came about as a word in 1946.
Apparatus for detection underwater. Lets you find things underwater. And that one is slightly cheating, if you like. It's a mostly acronym. So, nah. And that is that word, sonar, has been invented by comparison with radar because they do similar things. And you couldn't really make a word that was just because it wouldn't have any vowels in it. It's not a word. If it was SNR, sound navigation ranging, then it would be an initialism, but I think it's much nicer to be able to say sonar. So they've cheated a little bit, but I think we can still call it an acronym. Laser. Did you know that laser was originally an acronym? It's been around since 1960, which is why I think we now always write it with lower case letters, and many people probably have no idea that that started out as an acronym. A laser, official definition, a device which converts light into a focused high energy beam, and it stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Laser. Scuba, 1952, so we've had this word for quite a while, but it was originally an acronym spelled with capital letters. A device that lets divers breathe underwater, stands for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. SCUBA, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus.
So those were all general technology acronyms. Now we've got some computer-specific ones.
So we've got GIF from the 1980s, and I think everyone spells that with a lowercase g now. It stands for Graphic Interchange Format, GIF. And I reckon everyone knows what a GIF is, but if you said graphic interchange format, I think a lot of people wouldn't have a clue what you were talking about, and I had to look it up because I couldn't remember what all the words stood for. And then LAN. I don't actually use this word very often in my everyday life, but I think that people do pronounce it LAN. When I was much younger than I am now, computer nerds used to have LAN parties where they would all bring their computers and hook them up so that they could play computer games together. Now the internet kind of does that for us, so we don't need to, but LAN stands for Local Area Network, LAN. And we can tell it's an acronym because we don't say LAN, we say LAN, and we're able to do that because it's got a nice vowel right in the middle, so it can be a proper syllable that we can say. It can be a proper word, LAN. Okay, now, these three are Harry Potter related acronyms. So firstly, we have OWLS, Ordinary Wizarding Levels. Both the O and the W are contributing to our vowel spelling at the beginning there, OW. Then we have NEWTs, Nastily Exhausting Wizarding Tests. Of course, these have been created specifically by J.K. Rowling to be acronyms that are amusing and relevant to the world of Harry Potter. So, and then the very unfortunately named organisation that Hermione came up with, the Society for the Protection of Elvish Welfare, or SPEW.
And then finally, down the bottom here, we've got a business-related acronym, the BAS, Business Activity Statement.
And lastly, I just put on these two because they're a little bit tricky, and that's partly because they can either be acronyms or initialisms, and that depends on how they're pronounced, because an acronym is pronounced like a word, and eventually it's going to become almost certainly going to be spelled with lowercase letters as if it's a normal word, but an initialism is still going to be pronounced like it's a bunch of letters. So this depends on how you pronounce it. So ASAP, standing for as soon as possible, if you pronounce this ASAP, which some people do, ASAP, then it's an acronym because it's basically being a word. But if you just read each of the letters, ASAP, which many people do, then it's an initialism. So there's no difference to what this word looks like when we write it down, but depending on how you pronounce it, it is either being an acronym or it's being an initialism. And another one that's like that, I think maybe I'm just a little bit unusual in how I pronounce this, but I pronounce this CSIRO, and when I pronounce it that way, it's an initialism because that's CSIRO. It stands for the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, which is pretty long, which is why people abbreviate it or turn it into an acronym or an initialism. But a lot of people these days, including I think on the news, I've heard it pronounced as CSIRO, and if you pronounce it CSIRO, then that is a true acronym.